Hello, good people of YouTube. Mountbatten here, and today we are discussing the newest Tier 10 Techline ship in-game. That is the Dutch light cruiser, the Utrecht. Now you might be thinking, Sealord, you're like way behind on this Utrech video, bud. Utrech came back out in January. Yeah, sure, she did in her early access event, where you had to cough up over 20,000 doubloons in order to acquire her in that event, which is a little silly when it comes to paying that much for a ship that will be free for everyone else to grind in 2 months. So that's why I waited for, March to get here and the Utrech to come out in full. I acquired her. I've been playing her in the background for quite some time. Well, quite some time now, for roughly a month and change at this point, to where I'm comfortable enough to make a video on her. And the Utrecht's a very interesting cruiser because I went into this play session, or this review, I guess you could say, with the mindset of, okay, I've been the recipient of many an Utrech shell and many an Utrech bomb over the past, couple of months of her being in early access. I'm sure that, there's some characteristic about the ship that's terrible, or some big handicap for her to, have these really nice guns, and of course the 14-kilometer airstrike on top of that. Because many times in game, when you are the recipient of a ship's damage, you are, well, usually probably thinking something along the lines of, oh my god, this ship is so crazy, it can sit there and farm me out, it can do this, and can do that, and there's not much I can do about it, and you think it's all, sunshine and roses when playing that ship. But then when you go to actually play that ship, you realize that, oh, hey, yeah, sure, the guns are nice, but like the maneuverability's crap, the detection's crap, it doesn't have, barely any good consumables or anything like that, or if it does have great consumables, some other aspect about it is, terrible. There is some balancing factor there where it's a little bit more in-depth than what you thought it was, right? Battleship players are probably the worst at this for dealing with like light cruisers and such, because we'll sit there and we'll be getting constantly farmed by these light cruisers, and then we'll think, oh my god, all they have to do is sit there behind that island and hold down left mouse, and that's it. And then you one shot them thinking, okay, thank god, finally that cruiser that's crazy is out of my hair, after you one shot them, right? So if you get what I'm saying, good. If you don't get what I'm saying, play another class, you'll realize that it's not as simple as you think. The Utrecht, however, again, going to this, I was thinking, okay, to get these the airstrike that she has with the crazy reload and all the guns and stuff, surely some other aspect about the ship must be terrible. And not really. The ship's a lot crazier than I thought she was, for sure. Because, man, if you look at the Utrecht herself, not even talking about the airstrikes, like the ship itself, the guns, the hull, all of that, she is an excellent light cruiser. She gets 12 of the German 128mm guns. The same 128mm guns that you'll find on like the GK and the Preußen, well, not the Preußen, the GK secondary guns. They're the same caliber as the Preußen secondary guns, but the Preußen has like the late 1940s, early 1950s turrets. The GK has the 1940s turrets, and that's what Utrecht has as her main battery guns. Now, all you GK players out there, or all you German battleship players out there, know that these German 128mm guns can pin 32mm of armor, which is the last major armor threshold in the game, which means, when you're encountering all these high-tier ships, that's the armor that you want your HE guns to be able to pin if you are a cruiser, because that means you can farm out battleship. You can farm out their bow deck, their stern deck, and their superstructure easily, because you can pin that level of armor. And the Utrecht can do that without taking IFHE, which is a massive win for the Utrecht, because now you can build into like your fire chance and such, and have guns that can do good consistent damage on top of having a good fire chance. And the fire chance on these guns is 7% base, which you may be thinking, oh, that's not too good. Yeah, but when you're talking about like a light cruiser like the Utrecht that has 12 guns that reload in a base time of 4.5 seconds, that's plenty of HE going down range in order to, do good consistent damage and cause fires. And keep in mind too, you can build on top of that by taking Demolition Expert to get your fire damage up a little bit more, and taking the Fire Flags to get your damage up, to get your fire chance up a little bit more. All again on light cruiser guns. Now, on top of the guns having, good HE pins and a good fire chance, they're also quite excellent in terms of the ballistics of the HE shells. The HE shells are extremely comfortable to shoot at the base maximum range of 17 kilometers. Which is, a 17 kilometer base range on a light cruiser at tier 10, that is plenty to work with. I don't really think you need to take the range mod on the Utrech because, no. While the guns have excellent velocities for the base range, at 17 kilometers, you can feel that, okay, they're taking a second to get there now, and I've never seen a need to go beyond 17 kilometers with the Utrecht. It's been just fine at 17 for me. I guess if you want to farm out at that far, be my guest, but taking the reload mod and having, a sub 4 second reload time at 17 kilometers, that's pretty good with the shells that you're working with here. So, this is an excellent main battery set for a light cruiser at tier 10. The German 128s with a great 32mm penetration with a good fire chance. That by itself is excellent. And keep in mind, too, that the ship you build into the concealment has a 9.8 kilometer concealment. You get a heal. You have the D7 hull, which means you have a 50mm main belt, which, I'm not saying go out there and tank for days, but you can, surprisingly tank a lot with this hull if you can bait the enemy team into shooting your main armor belt. I'm not saying that's how you should be thriving in the Utrecht, but it can do it. So if you can, like say you get caught out in the open, if you can, just tempt those battleships to shoot that 50mm strip or shoot around that 50mm strip, and you're angled enough, there's no shells in game that can overmatch 50 millimeters of armor yet, so that is a nice little bit to have. If you played the D7, then you know what to expect here when it comes to the armor and such. And that's what the Utrecht is. It's a D7 class cruiser that could have been rearmed with 128 millimeter guns after the war, because wargaming is having to make up a lot of stuff now. But anyway, so the ship itself is excellent. It's an excellent light cruiser. Before we even get to the airstrikes, now keep in mind she does not have torpedoes. She doesn't have hydro. You get a speed boost, a heal, damage con. That's it for the consumables on the ship, which is a little lacking when it comes to light cruiser utility. But still, the main battery guns are quite good. And I haven't talked about the AP yet. The AP is excellent. You get the 120mm AP. It is quite good. If something shows you broadside, even a battleship, the guns have more than enough pin and more than enough oomph to farm their upper belt, their extremities for easily 5, 6, 7k a salvo, depending upon how your RNG feels right and what you're attacking. And of course, other light cruisers too. Something slips up and shows you broadside. Yeah, it's a very bad day for them because you're pumping them with 1,228mm AP shells every, again, depending upon your builds, sub 4 seconds. So that's great. So that right there, already an excellent light cruiser. And then we get to her party trick, right? The airstrikes. So the Utrecht's airstrikes are quite a bit different from the Golden Luz airstrikes, which is, of course, what she's going to be compared to, because that's her big sister, right? The Dutch heavy cruisers. So, but the big eyebrow-raising aspect of the Utrecht's bombers is that they have a 14-kilometer range with a 36-second reload. That's right, you have essentially a battleship reload on your airstrike, which is a little nuts. Compare that to the Golden Luz airstrike, which has an 80-second reload. With the module, mind you. I have both the airstrike module on the Utrecht and the Golden Luz. So you're still looking at an under half the amount of reload on the Utrecht's planes, and they have a whole kilometer extra range. Now, you do pay for that with the planes. The Golden Luz planes, you have 12 planes per flight. Utrech, you have 7 planes per flight. The bombs on the Utrech planes can only pin 34 millimeters of armor versus the Golden Luz 37 millimeters of armor. The Utrech planes also only have a 33% fire chance versus the 39% fire chance of the Golden Luz. So, that's the differences. Are they big? Kinda. I mean, 3 millimeters less pin, it's not going to matter too much. I mean, there's a handful of ships that you won't be able to pin with the Utrech planes versus the Golden Luz planes. But when we're talking about the airstrikes, where you really want these airstrikes to land, or on superstructure anyway, and superstructure at tier 10, it's, 19 millimeters of armor, so both bombs have plenty of oomph to get through that, and you can still pin the 32 millimeter bow and stern deck of most tier 10 ships, and you can still pin the 32 millimeter mid deck of a lot of tier 10 ships with the Utrech bombs anyway. So again, not that big of a deal. 33% fire chance versus a 39% fire chance. 7%, 6% difference here. Not a big deal, really. Considering the amount of bombs you're dropping anyway, you're going to be setting fires pretty constantly with the Utrech planes anyway. Not that big of a deal here. The 14-kilometer range, that is most certainly nice. Couple that with a 36-second reload, that's kind of nuts that they put those two together. With just really, again, like slight changes to the planes. Now, you do get 4 less planes with the Utrech's, 5 less planes with the Utrech's bomber squadrons rather than with the Golden Luz squadron. So, of course, it's easier for the enemy to shoot down your squadron because they have to chew through a lot less planes, and obviously with less planes, each plane that you lose hurts that much more. But again, who cares? You get more in 36 seconds anyway. So what's really funny about the Utrecht is that you can, very much like the Trump, just sit behind an island, and as long as you have spotting going on, you can use your airstrikes as essentially your primary damage income for as long as there are enemy ships within your airstrike range, considering how fast they reload. So, you sit behind an island, and you just dump all over enemy ships with these planes, and you'll have a nice bit of damage by the time, the fight for that cap is over with. So that's kind of toxic, and that's without even using the main battery guns on the Utrecht, right? You can do all this without ever being spotted because you're not firing your main battery guns. So that's kind of goofy in my opinion. So, yeah, I mean, think about all the cruisers in game that, hug next to islands and such. Like the Des Moines, the Moskvas, all the Soviet cruisers, all the light cruisers that want, of course, hug their island waifu. You can be there in the Utrecht, and if they're spotted, just dump on them. Not even if they're spotted. If you just see where their shells are coming from, you can drop these planes on top of them with no problem, because you don't have to lock onto the ship to get, a decent dispersion like you do with the main battery guns. You can literally just hover over where you see their shells coming from and drop on top of them, and you'll probably get some pretty solid hits with your bombs. It's really funny that these ships were introduced as, the heavy cruisers. Wargaming touted them as, this is the answer to island camping cruisers. But they're now the best island camping cruisers in game, and the light cruisers even more so, because with the Utrecht you don't have a smokescreen, so you're going to be hugging islands the entire time while you murder cruisers that do the same. So that's kind of nuts. They also have really good AA, which is really funny too. Utrecht's no exception here either. It doesn't have DFAA like Golden Luz does, but has pretty solid AA. And it's really funny that the ship that's spamming planes has really solid AA. So you put these two together, you put the excellent cruiser that is Utrecht itself, you put the really nice bombers that she has into one ship, and now you have a really powerful tier 10 light cruiser. What I do think keeps this ship from being outright busted, though, is the fact that, like I mentioned, doesn't really have a lot of utility. You have an engine boost and a heal. That's all you get for your consumables at tier 10. No hydro, no DFAA, no radar, nothing like that. In an era where we have so many ships with radar and hydro now at tier 10, you don't get any of that with the Utrecht, and you don't even get a smokescreen. So you definitely need ship spotting for you with the Utrecht, because she's not really that nimble, so that's a little awkward, right, with how sluggish the ship can be. So you definitely have to be, behind an island or borrowing somebody's smokescreen, and you have to have spotting in order to do very well in the Utrecht. And of course, with how many a high-tier game goes, that's not going to happen every match. You kind of have to, do what you can and make things work, and you'll find yourself a lot of times firing from like your maximum range, sometimes in the open water because there is no spotting for you, and that's when things tend to go terribly, because the better armored hull of the Utrech does of course lead to more battleships getting full pins on you and you having a not so great time. So I think that's what really keeps her in check for the time being. But like an Utrech with support, with spotting, oh my god, the thing can lock down a cap pretty much by itself. Unless someone gets really brave and sneaks behind it in like a torpedo destroyer or something and shoves a bunch of torpedoes down its throat. But that's also risking getting murdered by the 128mm guns that have excellent ballistics at medium range, let alone at close range. And at close range, this thing eats destroyers like it's no tomorrow. So like you see in the background footage, we had a very nice match here. A match that wasn't one-sided one way or the other. It went pretty much the full duration, and there's a good bit of back and forth. And you see how good the Utrecht is at just farming damage and murdering things, especially again those cruisers, like American cruisers that always want an island hug, or those battleships that find themselves in the open, spotted 14 kilometers away from you, like the German battleships, or any of the battleships that are a little bit chunky and have large superstructures as well. It's very good at dealing with those things for sure. So Utrecht, if you're looking to grind it, I'd highly recommend it. It's been out for 4 months now and hasn't been nerfed yet, so there's a very slim chance of this thing getting nerfed in the future. One of the benefits of having, like, I guess these long time reviews or long format reviews is if I do the review 3 months after the ship comes out of early access, it should have been nerfed by now, like the Pan American battleships. So it's a solid cruiser. If you're good in light cruisers, I would highly recommend it. So yeah, definitely check it out if you're interested in that. If you like the Dutch heavy cruisers, you'll probably like the Utrecht. If you've played kind of like the Atlanta type cruisers, light cruisers with all the destroyer caliber guns that bolted to them up and down the superstructure, you kind of know what to do here. Like you've seen in the background footage, find an island, hug it, burn things down, drop your airstrikes on other cruisers or battleships contesting the cap, or really anywhere within your 14-kilometer range, and murder destroyers. Rinse, wash, repeat, profit. So if you guys enjoyed this review of the Utrecht, if you did, make sure to drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, all of that good stuff. And I hope you guys have a wonderful Saturday, a wonderful weekend. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.